And we have Bob Ray joining us now. Mr. Ray, thanks for taking the time.
Great to be with you.
Now, we are going to talk about your time as ambassador and that last speech you gave, but I do have to ask about the developments happening in Europe in recent days. Of course, the talks to potentially end the Russia-Ukraine war. Do you think that there's a chance of something tangible that Ukraine can accept this week?
Well, we'll just have to see. I think the question really is not just on the Ukrainians, it's on the Russians as well. I mean, if the Ukrainians have already accepted the principle of a ceasefire. So if you wanted to see an end to the fighting, there's only one country that has to say yes, and that's Russia. Because Ukraine has already said they're prepared to stop fighting and to start from where they are, the ceasefire line being where it is, and have a strong negotiation with the Russians. But that's not what's been proposed. So the word ceasefire doesn't actually appear in the document. So we need to understand that there's still a lot of work to be done to get us to where we need to be.
And so what do you make of that original proposal we saw from the United States, that 28-point plan? Do you agree with those who essentially see it as repeating Russia's own demands?
Well, it comes pretty close to being the Russian position. But again, I don't think it's really, there's a whole lot worthwhile in going in for me to go through in detail. Lots of experts have analyzed the document and have pointed out its shortcomings in a variety of ways. I think the critical thing is that the Americans, the Europeans, and the Ukrainians are finally talking, because this was not, as opposed to President Wilson, who talked in 1917 about the importance of having open arrangements openly arrived at. The arrangement is not open, and the process of getting there has not been open. So we need more transparency in the discussion, and there's got to be no more surprises, and we've got to get to the point where nobody's saying it's my way or the highway. It's got to be a discussion that looks at the choices and the options, none of which are easy. But the essential thing is to try to get to a way of stopping the killing without abandoning all our principles. And I think that's the key point.
Okay, I do want to talk to you about the United Nations and the principles of the UN, because in your speech, you said that the United Nations is in crisis. What is the crisis as you see it?
Well, I think there's really two, and they're really huge. The first one is a financial crisis. I mean, there's much less money coming in than is required for the UN to do its job, and so the UN has had to lay off. And I say the UN, I mean the whole system, all of the system, has had to lay off tens of thousands of people, and is doing much less than what needs to be done in a whole number of areas, and many programs have been cut completely. And this is not receiving enough attention in terms of the impact that it's having, particularly on developing countries. So the financial problems have to be solved by the UN becoming more efficient in how it operates on the one side, but on the other side, there has to be adequate funding. So that needs to happen. But there's an even bigger problem, and that is that there's a sense, I think, in the world that the UN is not able to do all the things that the global population wants it to be able to do. And the problem is the charter, the way the Security Council has been set up, a lot of things don't really allow that to happen. So rather than just throw up our hands and say there's nothing we can do, we have to look at within the existing frame, and also broadening the frame a bit, how can we actually make the UN more effective and ensure that things can get done which ought to be done. And that requires a lot of change of behavior on the part of member states, but in particular of the most powerful. And I worry that the big three, China, Russia, and the United States, seem to have a very different vision of how things should work. And they very much want to see things work as they want them to work, and say everybody else has to go along with what we do. So we have this tension between a strong desire for multilateralism, strong desire to make the international system work, and the view of some countries that no, it's going to essentially be the game where the most powerful decide what's going to happen, and everyone else just has to sit back and take it. And I think that's a bigger debate than just a narrow debate over finances.
So where do you think Canada, as a middle power, then fits into that debate? You have now a successor at the UN, David Lameni. How do you think he's going to be able to navigate that kind of geopolitical situation where, as you say, you have the U.S., the U.S., Russia, and China now really looking beyond multilateral bodies and really just engaging in more head-to-head talks?
Well, it's not just head-to-head talks; it's head-to-head fighting. I mean, you've got the possibility of China doing something terrible in Taiwan. You've got, which is still a possibility we can't ignore. You've got the Russians in the most bloodthirsty way attacking Ukraine, and the United States doing some things, one could argue, in terms of tariffs, in terms of some of the other unilateral actions that they've been taking. Going well beyond the framework of what most of us would see as international law, international commercial law with respect to tariffs, international law with respect to how countries are supposed to conduct themselves. And I think that's the real challenge. It's of course it's secret agreements secretly arrived at, which is the opposite of what much of the 20th and 21st century was supposed to be about. But we've also got a huge problem with the way in which the world is working. What can we do? Well, actually, there's a lot we can do, because there's a whole lot of countries, most of Africa, Asia, Europe, most of the countries of the world want the system to work differently, and they want it to work in a more constructive way. So we have to work hard with all of those countries, not just Western countries, but countries around the world in doing that. And I think that's something Mr. Carney really tried to do when he came to New York in September. He broadened the scale and scope of the dialogue with a number of countries, linking it, of course, to our own interest in greater trade and commerce because of the relationship with the U.S. at the moment, but also really working hard to get other countries' initiatives moving forward on climate change and on a whole bunch of issues. So Canada, I think, remains firmly internationalist, firmly committed to multilateralism, and firmly committed to reform and change and pragmatic improvement in a situation right now which cries out for pragmatic change. And I think that's what Mr. Lameni also believes in. I've had many chats with him about things, and I think he's going to be a great representative for Canada at the UN.
Well, I will ask about Canadian foreign policy, though. You talked about multilateralism. The recent budget does contain some cuts to foreign aid, returning it to a pre-pandemic level. Does that concern you? Do you see that at all? Is Canada potentially taking a step back in its global commitments at this moment?
It concerns me, but on the other hand, it's concerned me for several years that not just Canada, but several other countries have been, I would say, nibbling away at the edges in terms of what an international commitment there should be. I don't worry about our broad sense of commitment and engagement at all, but I do think that every country, including Canada, has to be aware that we're not going to solve the world's problems with less. We're only going to solve the world's problems with more. And that means more ideas and vision, but it also means a greater financial commitment. So to that extent, yeah, I wasn't happy with that aspect of the budget, but there are many other features of the budget that I thought were necessary. So I mean, we are cutting back on expenditures, and we're supposed to be increasing investments. I just think we should be looking at a lot of the stuff that we do globally is really an investment in our own security and in our own future. And I want to see us have a robust defense, diplomacy, and development budget that continues to look at the ways in which we can make change happen. But I know that there'll be a lot of discussions going forward about how we can make that happen.
All right, we'll have to leave the conversation there for now. But Bob Rae, want to thank you again for your time tonight.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.